Our next thread is titled, Don't Want Father on Birth Certificate. OP says, if I don't want him on the birth certificate, but I do want him to be there during the birth, how do I do so? Or should I give birth without him there? I conceived after a month of knowing him accidentally. Found out I was pregnant at 2 months. During my pregnancy, 32 weeks now, he has not told me what he's going to do exactly. He gives me little bits and pieces. I'm over his nonsense and BS, but he has 4 other kids that he's there for and stated that he will be there for mine. A deadbeat is something that he absolutely hates, which is why I want to give him that fair chance of being at the birth. But for my peace of mind, I don't want him on the birth certificate once he shows me. I don't want him on the birth certificate. Once he shows me he will be entirely involved and not jump in and out, I may reconsider on changing the last name. This is kind of a complicated thread with a lot of little pieces that don't really make a lot of sense with each other. I think it sounds like OP is assuming that having him on the birth certificate equals giving him the name, giving her son his father's name, or the daughter, I guess we don't know, giving the child the father's name. And I'm pretty sure you can do those 2 things separately. That said, for me, it's actually quite hard for me to comment on this one because number 1, I would never end up in this situation ever. And number 2, I would always approach the situation from a perspective of how can I best succeed at allowing my child to have a relationship with both parents, because I think it's absolutely essential for the child to have a relationship with both parents. And one of the ways that I do think you can kind of support that is by having the father on the birth certificate, because that's a legal document that recognizes him as the father. Now, I don't know if the 4 other kids are from one woman, from multiple women, or what's going on in terms of the familial setup here. That's probably not someone that I would want to have a child with. But for as long as she says he has other kids that he's there for, he says he's committed to being there for my child. He hates deadbeat dads. Nothing here suggests that he's a terrible parent or that he's an abusive man or that there's any reason to doubt that he can interact with the child in a way that's healthy and helpful and great for the child. And so under all of those circumstances, it would never even occur to me to question whether he should be on the birth certificate or not, because he is the father. And it's important, not just legally speaking, to have him be recognized as the father, but it's also important for the child, who at some point will grow up and be like, hey, who's daddy? What's that? Like, where did I come from? And who will have to deal with that question from an identity, from the identity side of things. To not have the father there, despite knowing exactly who the father is, seems strange to me and not something that I would want to do. And it seems exclusionary, right? So it's a tool that the mother has where she can choose to exclude the father from the baby's life. And that's how I would read doing it. Now, that said, I don't know anything about the legal background here. There's a lot of people in the comments who go a lot more into a lot more depth around the legal implications of having him versus not having him. A lot of people will say, hey, you need to have him on the birth certificate in order to have child support payments. And that I think is also kind of sad, because there you're saying, hey, it's not worth having him on the birth certificate just because he really is the father. And as the father, he does have paternal rights to this child that should be respected. You're instead saying I should have him on the birth certificate just so I can fleece some money off him, which is not a great attitude to have. Again, assuming that what you want to do and what you want to achieve is a healthy relationship with both parents involved in the child's life. And that, I think, is the ultimate goal that you can aim for. So there's that aspect to it that I won't go into. There is one part to this that I kind of want to say as well, which is such a perfect example of these types of situations that you really don't want to end up in as a mother or as a woman. Life is so much simpler and so much easier when you have kids in the context of a stable, committed, long-term relationship. And I struggle to understand why and how it happens to so many women that you end up in these types of situations and then you don't have this level of security or stability for yourself or for your child, and then you kind of have to start from scratch in terms of building all of those things up in a way that's really healthy for your child in the long run. That seems like a shame, and probably something that I would take from every single one of these types of stories, that it's a good reminder to try to avoid it if you absolutely can. Now, if you can't, again, the top goal should be, how can I create an environment in which both parents are involved in the kid's life, because that's paramount. And what I find a little bit strange about the juxtaposition here of the two options, or of the two aspects that OP is talking about. On the one hand, she says, I don't want him on the birth certificate because I need a bit more commitment from him, and he hasn't given me the impression that he's committed. I kind of get where that's coming from, but I would still say that maybe having him on the birth certificate is a sign that you do want him to be involved, and it is the truth. He is the father. The other aspect of it, she says, I kind of want to still have him at the birth just to give him a chance to show me that commitment. I would argue that having him on the birth certificate is something that's more relevant for him and for the child, because those are the other people involved in that legal document as well. Whereas having him present at the birth is more something that's for the mother, and that therefore the fact that these two things are mentioned at the same time as if they are somehow connected to each other is a little bit strange to me. I understand that some people will say, hey, if he's present at the birth, then he's going to develop a deeper connection with the baby. I don't think that that's the case with the majority of dads, to be honest. Not that I'm advocating for dads to not be present at births, but if I were comfortable enough with a man that I was happy for him to be present at the birth of his child, then it would, again, just never occur to me to remove him from the birth certificate or to not include him in the birth certificate if I had the choice. So that's how I feel about this one. I think it's a really unfortunate situation. I think it kind of sucks for the kid. Always, pretty much, the kids are always the ones that lose out the most. But I hope for OP and for the child and for the dad here that they do manage to figure things out, and that he really is a good parent and that he remains involved in his child's life. I'll give you a couple of the comments here just for some context. This person says, it doesn't matter whether you want him on the certificate or not, or whether he is there or not. If he wants to be on it, he can take it to court. And once they do a paternity test, they will put him on it. And then they get into a little bit of a debate about whether he's added to the birth certificate or not. But generally speaking, if you legally establish paternal rights to the child, then you still have paternal rights to the child. One person says, don't do this to your child because of your own petty disagreements. You have no obligation to give your child their father's last name. It's not going to give him automatic custodial rights, and ultimately will change nothing that he cannot achieve through a court-ordered DNA test. This is the person who works for Social Security, and then she says there are problems for kids when they have to jump through hoops to establish paternity at a later stage in life, and that's unfortunate as well. Honestly, I think it's kind of lying on a legal document. That's how I feel about it. But maybe I don't understand what birth certificates are used for these days. As far as I'm concerned, both parents should be on the birth certificate for as long as they are the biological parents of the child, and you know that they are the biological parents of the child, then that's how that should work. One person says, they go into a lot of depth about how she doesn't really plan. A lot of people here don't really plan on having the father involved in the kid's life, and that's why they do it. And I understand that. You'll see here, there's this one statement where this person says, birth certificate is important for the sake of your child, and it also lets you collect child support from him. It just makes me sad when people break down families to these, on this kind of level. I think that relationships are so much more meaningful and so much more powerful, and the relationship that you have with your children should be something sacred and should be treated with a little bit more seriousness. And instead, what happens is that people have this kind of levity with it. They try to reduce it to this material exchange of money and goods. And that's not healthy, and that's not good for anyone. And the birth certificate is kind of an extension of that, because it's just a piece of paper, and who cares about this piece of paper? All of these rituals that we have in place have a meaning. The birth certificate is a way, yes, it's just a legal document, but it's also a way to recognize both parents, and parental rights on both sides, both from the mother's side and from the father's side, are things that exist, and he does have right to that child because it is his child, and it doesn't, one person cannot make a child. So it just seems to me a little bit sad and a little bit unfortunate, and there is a lot of losers and not very many winners when you end up in this type of scenario, and you have to consider this kind of question.